Hey folks, it's Rob here at Rocky Ridge Farm. One of the unique challenges that we've had to overcome as we're starting up this farm operation, this pasture-based enterprise, is getting water out to the livestock. Now, in an ideal situation, we would have permanent infrastructure set up to have water access points at all of our pastures. And that's the goal still, but we had some unique challenges here in Northeast Pennsylvania that made that a little difficult, at least in the early going. First and foremost, we're dealing with a lot of small acreage, kind of disconnected fields in broken up pasture and wood situation, and really a lot of rolling hills, kind of undulating terrain. So it's not easy to just have water at a high point and connect it through a network of fields. Our pastures are really disjointed. So our own at our place are that way. And then as we've grown the cow herd and we've looked to reach out and rent ground that's nearby, it just wasn't an option to set up permanent water, or water wasn't available. So we had to come up with some creative solutions to be able to still utilize that ground but get water to the animals. So we want to show you a couple of the solutions we've come up with, we're kind of proud of, and that have worked well for us as we're growing this operation. So this truck you see behind me, we affectionately call it the monster truck, was a brainchild I had a couple years ago when I saw this listed on Marketplace out in Ohio. And it started life as an old crop sprayer. And I thought, man, that could be just the ticket. This was our first foray kind of into the pastured water systems. Prior to that, we were running a lot of long hoses, making the cows walk quite a bit further to water points and that type of thing. And that had its drawbacks. Number one, the cows would end up loitering around water points, and they weren't staying out on the pasture, on the paddocks, eating where we wanted them to, putting manure down where we wanted them to. And we got a lot of trails and stuff developed, so it just wasn't optimal. So this gave us the ability to haul a good amount of water and stock the animals in one place for almost a week. This is a 1,600 gallon tank. We've got about 40 animals out here, and depending on the weather, that'll last us about a week. So only have to fill it up about once a week. So we spent some time, we got it back. There's a whole nother video about that story. It was kind of exciting to get it back from Ohio, but you could check that out, and then how we kind of rebuilt it. And this is kind of the final iteration. So things I was really concerned about with mobile water is that I had enough capacity to hold the animals for multiple days. I didn't want to have to be hauling water on a daily basis. That just wasn't efficient. So this has enough capacity with a 1,600 gallon tank that lasts long enough that it's worthwhile, and we can still be efficient. Other thing I was really concerned about was rutting up my pastures. If I had to pull something with a tractor, if the ground is a little bit wet at all, you're going to get a lot of compaction, and you're going to start getting ruts if the ground is wet. So the beauty of this machine with this high flotation tires on the front and back, now this is only 2-wheel drive, it's not 4-wheel drive, but that tire is almost 4 feet wide across the back. So it's designed as a sprayer to be able to get on really wet ground early in the spring and be able to deal with crops even if the weather's bad. So it works really well for us. This truck will go anywhere any of my tractors will go with a lot less impact to the fields. So I didn't have to worry about getting it stuck, and I didn't have to worry about huge impact on my fields and damage and that type of thing. So that was a really big plus. So what we did with it, if you want to look here, we mounted, first of all, this is a 40 gallon tank just got from Tractor Supply, and it has a float valve. Let's see if you can see it down there. That's a Job Rojo or Rojo, I don't know how the New Zealanders pronounce it, float valve, and it's bottom mounted so that the cows don't mess with it. And so I don't have to move anything. I have a valve up here. I can turn off water to the tank, and then that just gravity flows through that pipe right there down to a hole I drilled here in the back. There you can see it. So it connects to that valve. So this has worked fantastic. So the cows don't really mess with it. And I also have 2 other valves here, so I can hook a hose. If I need a gravity flow off of something, I can hook a hose right there. And then I have a bulk dump valve, if you will, right here, which has turned out to be really nice if you need to fill something up quick. Usually what I do is just top this tank off after I move it, get it up all the way to the edge, and then check my valve to make sure water's not still flowing. I've had it happen a couple of times where I parked on a little bit too much of an angle, and the valve wasn't turning off before the water's running over the edge of the stock tank. So dumped, 1,000 gallons of water on the ground before I realized it. So I always check that now. This has been a nice addition. This is a 40-gallon tank. What we did the first year is I didn't have this saddle tank developed yet. I just hooked a short hose here on my spigot, and I had a 100-gallon stock tank that I set here, and I just set it right on the ground. And that worked fine, had a float valve on it. I had two issues. Cows would chew on the hose, and every time I had to move this, which was ideally daily, I had to dump that 100 gallons. So I was dumping that much, and I had to refill it more often because I was dumping so much water on the ground. So this has been a big improvement. I did this spring. Basically rigged up this bracket, welded some supports in place, and it fits in here perfectly, and it has really been a good solution. So there's enough access for the cows, and I don't have to move anything. All I have to do, just get in the truck and go when it's time to move, and we're done. The other nice feature we've added on here is I put a mineral feeder on this side. So the saddlebag on the opposite side, right there. You can see they've kind of beat that up a little bit, but I keep a free choice mineral in there, and that's been another big addition I think has really helped with our breed back and our fertility for our animals. So having easy access so you don't have to move a feeder from pasture to pasture, everything's self-contained, it works great. Lastly, how do we fill it? So right here, notice this hose runs up to the top of my tank. So I've got just a little Honda water pump. Got a quick connect fit on the end here, and I drop the end of that water pump hose into a pond, hook it up to that, and let her rip. And it takes about 10 minutes, 10-12 minutes to fill this tank with pond water. So it's not too bad overall. Makes the process pretty simple, pretty easy, and it lets us move water quickly with these animals, keep them where we want them, keep the fertility on the paddock they're at, and makes for a quick, efficient move every day. So we're overall really happy with it. One of the problems we ran into when we purchased our mobile chicken coops was we had to come up with another way to get water out to those. So in years past, we used an 800-gallon tank on a flatbed trailer that we would just position on a high point on the field and let it gravity flow down a hose that we could fill buckets with for our Salatin style feeders. Well, with our new mobile range coops, that wasn't going to work. The water tanks are mounted high in them. We didn't have the kind of volume capability we needed, so gravity flow wasn't really in the cards unless we could really mount something high and basically build a water tower on the property. So we had to figure out how are we gonna get water to these new pens. So our solution is this little baby here that I came up with. This is my mobile water wagon. So this thing started life as a Lesco lawn sprayer. They used it for spraying pesticides or herbicides, that type of thing. And it had a pump. It had its own gasoline motor with a pump, and then it had a big hose reel here that you could go and spray lawn or whatever. So I found this on Marketplace. This is a 300-gallon tank, and the pump was shot. It had some of the other plumbing on it, but I thought this might be just the ticket. I'd explored several different options for water trailers, and this really worked out well. It's got a good rugged frame under it, as you can see, and I really like the flotation tires. That's a big plus for sometimes a little wet around here. So pretty simple. But what I decided to do was pull the pump off, and I bought a hydraulic pump from Tractor Supply. You can see right here, bolted it up where the old one was, and then basically jerry-rigged some plumbing from some old valves and piping that I had left over from our spray truck water tank project. Had some pieces left over, plumbed it into the pump, added on a little extra fill hose here, you can see here, and I use these universal quick connects. There's a Gator Lock quick connects to make it easy to fill, and I can fill it with a pump here. I haven't used that much just because we're trying to keep cleaner water in it for the chickens, but I have that capability. And then this pump runs off the hydraulics from the tractor. Now I considered doing a gasoline pump. You can get like a little Honda pump or something like that you can sit here with a gas motor, and then you wouldn't be necessarily having to tow it with a tractor. If you had a big enough side by side, you could probably pull this, but I'd be a little leery of doing that. It's a little heavy, but small tractor, even a compact, handles this fine. And so I knew I was going to have hydraulic access, and so it just eliminated a step from the problem. So the hydraulic pump works great. The hydraulic pump is cheaper than the gasoline pump. You'll pay almost as much for the hoses as I did for the pump. I think the pump was about 300 bucks, and I spent probably almost 200 on hydraulic hoses and fittings. So all in all, I've got probably about $1,500 in it, and it works awesome. It has just been a tremendous asset. It's so nice to turn the water hauling job from about a 45 minutes to an hour job. Now it's about a 15-minute job to fill up those chicken tractors. So let me show you one of my other features I'm kind of proud of here is I put a float valve in this. So you can see right here, there is a little dog leg here. I connected a short piece of hose into an elbow with a quick attach on the end. And then underneath, I drilled a hole in this lid and attached this float valve. So there's a little short section of pipe, and then that's a float valve that controls the water level. So as that water runs out, fills up my tank, once it gets up all the way to the top, it shuts off the water from the hose. So what that allows me to do, and I'll show you, I back this thing up, I hook it, I have a little short section of hose with the other end of the quick connect on it, hook it up to my trailer, and then I can just let it fill overnight or however long, and I'm not tied to sitting here, staying and waiting for it to fill up. So it's always full. I park it, hook it back up to the hose, and so the next time I come back, it's always full, and I don't have to worry about it, and I don't have to babysit a hose. Well, so this setup isn't fancy, but it's highly functional. So this chicken coop started life, I don't know, 40, 50, 60 years ago. It was on the property when my grandparents bought it, and they kind of rebuilt it. They used it through my growing up years, had chickens on and off in this coop, and it used to set up by the house. Well, when we moved here, there hadn't been birds in it for quite some time. The floor was kind of rotted out. So I put a new floor in it, put it on a trailer, and we sent it out to the pastures. So we needed a water system for this, and so what we ended up doing is putting this 55-gallon drum here on the side. I bolted some angle iron to the wall, made a bracket and a platform for it, and then this catches, it has some holes drilled in the top, and so it catches any runoff or rainfall off the roof. We got this gutter that runs down there into the barrel and keeps it topped off, so it's essentially perpetual motion. So then it runs down here through this pipe, gravity feeds its way back inside, where we have a Placid bell drinker set up inside. And also we can hook off of this. I've got a spigot right there. I can run water out if I need to. Oftentimes we'll have just a pan there, so they have water outside. We don't have one set up right now, but we'll do that on occasion, especially if the weather's hotter and they're out and about more. So this has worked really well. Normally we have pretty consistent rainfall around here, so I've had to fill this up I think once this summer. We filled it up when we brought it out, and I filled it one other time. We had a little bit of a dry stretch, but usually it's not an issue. It gets enough rainfall up here to keep it tapped off, and I don't have to touch it throughout the summer, so it's really worked out nice. We've got about 35, 40 hens out here right now. This is the boys' enterprise. They take care of all the egg layers, and it just makes it a simple process for them. So not fancy, but it's worked out really well. Okay, so for this last one, I know not technically pasture based, but this is pre-pasture based, and this water system we have up here for our chick brooders is probably the one that actually saves us the most time on a daily basis. So our brooders, where our chicks all start out for their first 3 weeks, live up here behind our machine shed. So you can see over here, we have 4 total huts. They're set on 2 different trailers. Got our grain bin over here. And this is where the birds spend their first couple weeks. So they're in there about 3 weeks before they go out on the pasture for the remaining 5 weeks out in the range coops. Well, the issue is we don't have any running water up here. So we came up with this little mini water tower here. It's just an IBC tote that rests on this platform I built. I got these brackets at the local hardware store. They're just for building tree stands, actually. They're not tree stands, but deer stands that you would put out in the field. So everybody has these Taj Mahal tree stands around here. They put up on the platforms overlooking the food plot. Like, why don't you just go to the zoo to shoot deer? But anyway, they work great for this. So I put this together, got a couple of these brackets, built a little platform, spent me maybe an hour or 2. And it worked great to get this IBC tote up here high enough. And then I just put a hose valve on it and a splitter. So each of these, one of these hoses runs to each of the trailers. And then if you look over here, I'll show you what's actually in the huts where these hoses run to. So here we are over at one of the brooder huts, and you can see our water ends up here at one of these Plasson bell drinkers that services this hut. There's about 140 birds in here. So all I did is just run that hose across the ground over here to another splitter, set up a couple adapters that drop it into this smaller hose that services the bell drinker. And it just runs up the wall, up across that center joist, and drops down to the water. So our first iteration of this, we tried using cup drinkers that were, the water was direct plumbed into a PVC pipe and had the little nipple drinkers with the cups, and really just didn't work at all. We had either issues with leaks or the chicks couldn't learn how to use them fast enough. So we just dropped a bell drinker in here, and it's really worked out fine. And it's what they see once they get out to the range coop, and that solved a lot of problems. So this has really worked out really well. We're really happy with it. Here's one of the buckets that we had prior. So a year before I set up this system, we had one of these bucket waterers that we just picked up at Tractor Supply, and we'd have one of these in every coop. And they work fine, but with this many birds, you got to fill them up at least once a day, and that just ended up being a lot of hauled water every day. And if there's any problem with the floats, they drain, and then it just create a mess in here. So this gives us the ability to just really monitor it easily. All I got to do is look and make sure there's water in the IBC, and I got to fill that up maybe once every 3 weeks, maybe. And we put almost 2,000 birds through here this summer. So really happy with it. Saves us a lot of water hauling. So I've only filled that up, I think, 3 times this summer. So future goal with that is that I'm going to set up a gutter system here on our machine shed that'll go right down there and feed into our IBC. And then we'll have a completely self-contained system, and that's what I'm looking for. Perpetual motion, baby.